the goddess of contradictions. Imagine a goddess whose touch can turn strangers into lovers and turn armies into ash. A goddess who wears perfume and blood like they're the same kind of power. Her symbol is Venus, the brightest star in the dawn, yet her most famous journey is straight down into darkness. This is Ishtar, Queen of Heaven. Goddess of love, goddess of war. And in Mesopotamia, those were never opposites. They were two faces of the same force. Because with Ishtar, desire isn't gentle, it's a storm. And if you think you can ignore a storm, you haven't met her yet. Where heaven meets earth. To understand Ishtar, we have to step into the world that raised her, ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. This was a place of city-states and towering temples, where gods weren't distant ideas. They were powers woven into weather, politics, harvests, childbirth, and conquest. The divine wasn't a separate realm. It pressed against daily life like heat against skin. And in that crowded sky of gods, Ishtar was one of the brightest and the most feared, because she didn't just represent love. She represented what love can do. Who is Ishtar? Ishtar is the Akkadian name that becomes famous across Mesopotamia. And if you travel back through time into older Sumerian tradition, you meet a goddess so closely related she often becomes identified with her, Inanna. Different languages, different eras, shifting stories, but the gravitational center remains the same. A goddess of irresistible attraction, ruthless conflict, and terrifying independence. She's called the Queen of Heaven because she shines, because she rules, because she's seen. And she's associated with Venus, that light that appears at dawn and dusk, beautiful, bright, and impossible to ignore. But here's the key. Ishtar is not the goddess of romance in the modern sense. She's love as power, love as hunger, love as a force that can crown a king or break him. And she's war for the same reason. Not war as strategy, but war as unleashed energy. The roar, the frenzy, the momentum that turns the world upside down. If you're looking for a single word that captures Ishtar, it might be this: intensity. Everything about her is turned up. Beauty that dazzles. Anger that scorches. Desire that doesn't ask permission. Symbols. If you were an artist or a priest in ancient Mesopotamia and you wanted people to recognize Ishtar, you didn't need a name label. You needed signs. The first is her astral identity, Venus, the morning and evening star. A light that arrives before the sun like a promise or a warning. The second is the lion. Not because she's simply strong, but because the lion is raw authority made flesh, dominance, fear, and majesty, an animal that doesn't negotiate. And then there's her presence, often described as radiant, overwhelming, impossible to meet with calm. When Ishtar enters a story, the temperature changes. Because she isn't the goddess who sits back and watches the world happen. She's the goddess who walks in and makes the world rearrange itself. The first gate. There's a reason ancient people tied Ishtar to Venus. Venus is stunning, but it also disappears. It sinks beneath the horizon, swallowed by the sky, and then returns. So when Mesopotamians told a story about the Queen of Heaven vanishing into the underworld and coming back, it didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like the heavens themselves were speaking in myth. And that brings us to the story that defines her more than any other. The descent to the underworld. There is a place in Mesopotamian imagination where light doesn't go to win. It goes to end. The underworld is not a fiery hell. It's a kingdom of dust, silent, heavy, final, a land of no return. And Ishtar decides to go there. Some versions say she goes for power. Some say for a throne. Some say for a funeral rite. But the meaning is consistent. Ishtar does the unthinkable. She marches into death's territory as if death is just another rival. At the gates of the underworld, the guardian stops her. "Who are you?" he asks. Ishtar doesn't plead, she declares. She is the Queen of Heaven. She will enter. So the guardian sends word to Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead. And Ereshkigal replies with rules, not rage. If Ishtar wants to enter, she will enter as every soul enters, stripped. And so the gates open, one by one. At the first gate, something is taken from her. A crown, a weapon, a jewel, a symbol of authority, a piece of her glory. Ishtar protests. The guardian answers, "It is the law." Second gate, another piece falls away. Third gate, another. Gate after gate, the power that made her untouchable is removed. Until at last, at the final gate, Ishtar stands exposed. Not as a queen, not as a force, but as something vulnerable. And then she faces Ereshkigal. Here, the story becomes terrifying because the underworld doesn't bargain. Ereshkigal does not admire Ishtar's courage. She does not welcome her as an equal. In many tellings, Ishtar is struck down. Her life is taken, her body displayed. A shocking reversal for a goddess who usually bends others to her will. And above the earth, something breaks. Because Ishtar isn't just a character in a myth. She's a function of the world. When the goddess of desire and fertility is gone, the world loses momentum. The pulse slows. Life stops leaning forward. Time passes. And no one can replace her. So help is sought, not from armies, but from strategy. From those who understand that to retrieve someone from the underworld, you don't storm the gates. You exploit the rules. Ishtar's loyal attendant, Ninshubur in the older tradition, goes to the gods and pleads. And eventually help arrives in a form the underworld cannot easily deny. Beings who do not fight, but mirror pain. They enter the underworld and find Ereshkigal in agony. Not villainous agony, but the agony of a ruler whose realm is suffering too. And when they respond with empathy, when they acknowledge her pain instead of challenging her power, Ereshkigal's grip loosens. A deal is made. Ishtar can return. But the underworld is never cheated for free. A replacement must be found. And Ishtar rises, alive again, but she rises with a condition attached like a shadow. As she returns to the living world, she looks for someone to take her place. Someone who did not mourn. Someone who did not feel her absence. And in many versions, her gaze lands on Dumuzi Tammuz, a figure connected to her in love, in partnership, in seasonal cycles. And the story turns knife-sharp. The price of the goddess's return is that someone else must go down. It's not a happy ending. It's an ancient kind of truth. Life continues because something is always being paid. Why 7? Why 7 gates? Because 7 is a number that feels like a complete descent, step after step, layer after layer, until nothing is left. But it's also psychological. The underworld doesn't defeat Ishtar by overpowering her. It defeats her by unmaking her identity. Power isn't just strength. It's the symbols that tell the world who you are. And at each gate, Ishtar loses a piece of the story she wears. By the time she reaches the throne of the dead, she is forced to meet herself without the mask. Gilgamesh rejects a goddess. If the descent shows Ishtar facing death, the Epic of Gilgamesh shows something else. Ishtar facing rejection. In the story, Gilgamesh is the king of Uruk, strong, famous, dangerous in his own right. And Ishtar desires him. She offers him gifts that sound like destiny. Power, riches, royal legitimacy. The kind of favor that could make a man more than human in the eyes of his city. But Gilgamesh refuses. And he doesn't refuse gently. He speaks of her past lovers, men and beings who, in his telling, met disaster after receiving her affection. The implication is brutal. To be loved by Ishtar is to be consumed by Ishtar. This is not just an insult. In a world where gods demand recognition, rejection is rebellion. Ishtar is humiliated. And humiliation for a goddess of power is combustible. She goes to Anu, her divine father in the tradition, and demands a weapon. The bull of heaven. It's not a personal punishment. It's an urban catastrophe. The bull is unleashed upon Uruk. The land cracks. people die. The city that rejected Ishtar is forced to feel what her anger means. And when Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu kill the bull, they don't just save the city, they deepen the offense. Ishtar mourns, rages, curses, and the story makes a point that Mesopotamians understood in their bones. You can fight a man and win. You can fight a beast and survive. But when you fight a goddess's pride, the consequences don't end when the battle ends. Because gods don't forget. And they don't need to strike immediately to strike decisively. The most dangerous kind of love. In modern stories, love is often shown as comfort, something that heals you. Ishtar represents a different idea. Love is a force that changes you whether you're ready or not. The same power that makes you feel chosen can also make you feel owned. And that's why Ishtar stands with one foot in the bedroom and one foot on the battlefield. Because both are places where people lose control. Worship and real life. It's easy to treat myths like entertainment, but in Mesopotamia these stories had weight because Ishtar had weight. She wasn't only a character. She was a presence in cities, in temples, in ritual, in politics. In places like Uruk, an ancient city with deep ties to her older identity, people didn't just believe in her. They negotiated with her through offerings, prayers, festivals, and vows. For kings, Ishtar could be terrifying and useful. A ruler wanted divine backing, and Ishtar's favor could be described as irresistible legitimacy. A sign that your reign wasn't just force, but fate. For ordinary people, she could be approached for love, fertility, protection, and success. But also feared, because passion and conflict are unpredictable. If she ruled the energies that drive people toward each other and against each other, then she ruled the moments when your life could change in a single night. And this is where her contradiction starts to make sense. Love and war aren't opposites. They're both states where logic becomes secondary to emotion, momentum, and consequence. Ishtar isn't confused. She's complete. Legacy. Centuries after many of these myths first took shape, Ishtar's name still towered over the world, literally. In Babylon, one of the most famous monuments associated with her is the Ishtar Gate, a grand entrance adorned with brilliant glazed bricks and animal figures, lions among them, turning the city's architecture into a statement of divine power. A gate is a threshold. Between outside and inside, between chaos and order, between strangers and citizens. And naming that threshold for Ishtar makes perfect sense. Because Ishtar is a threshold too. Between desire and destruction. Between life and death. Between the heaven that shines and the underworld that swallows. What Ishtar still teaches. So what do we do with a goddess like Ishtar? If you try to shrink her into a single label, love goddess, war goddess, fertility goddess, she breaks the box. Because Ishtar isn't about one emotion. She's about the force behind emotion. She is the part of life that pulls you forward so hard you stop being who you were. The part of life that makes people build temples, write poems, swear oaths, start wars, end marriages, crown kings, and tear them down. And her greatest myth, The Descent, says something chilling and profound. Even the brightest power can be stripped. Even the Queen of Heaven can be brought to silence. But if the world needs what you represent, you will be dragged back into the light, even if the price is unbearable. Ishtar returns. Not because the underworld is weak, but because life, without desire, without drive, without the wild pulse she embodies, is not life at all. Which should we cover next? Ishtar is one of the most intense divine figures ever imagined, dazzling, dangerous, and utterly unforgettable. And next, if you want to keep going deeper into this world, we have two perfect paths. Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead, who didn't flinch when Ishtar arrived at her throne. Or Dumuzi, Tammuz, the one who pays the price when a goddess returns. If you enjoyed this journey, like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Ishtar, power, compassion and storm. Or Ereshkigal, silence, law, and inevitability.